is a holy connection point between your womb and my womb and every womb in this universe. We are intimately connected. We are a sacred sisterhood of women. Every woman has a story, and every one of those stories is the same story. It is the loss of her feminine essence and the reclamation of her pathway home, her journey back to Eden, to bring and ignite heaven within herself, within her being, so that women can water the gardens of the earth and call heaven to this fertile land to bloom anew. Welcome to today's video. You are watching the Sacred Temple channel. My name is Becc. Today I am speaking within the context of the container of the Daughters of Eden, the Holy Temple for Divine Feminine Light, which is a sister school of the Sacred Temple. And it is my honor to be here today. I want to speak with you about the feminine sound, the feminine song, the feminine essence, and what is meant by every woman's story. And part of this is going to be me sharing with you my story and also some revelations that I have had through working with the Sisterhoods of the Dawn and Mary Magdalene. The Dawn Sisterhood, or the Sisterhoods of the Dawn, is a collective consciousness of ascended feminine masters, you could say. It's the best way to put it. Who are connected to the energies and pathways of Venus, and they are helping you and every woman here today to reignite the pathways of Venus within yourself, within your energy body, to bloom heaven within you. Your pathways of Venus, for those of you who may not yet know, are your sexual pathways, but really your uniquely feminine pathways. There are certain energetic streams that flow here that are particular to women, and these connect you to your holy womb portal and to thereby connecting you to your feminine essence and your full feminine expression. For many, many eons, women have been without this sacred and holy power. Many eons ago, we understood and we knew what we were. We understood our energetic bodies. We understood our body. We embodied who and what we are, which is the feminine emanation. The darkness, the blackness, the portal, the pulling, the negative polarity, the beauty, the flavor, the seduction, the magnetism, the magic, the creativity, the birthing of the holy womb, which is the holy womb or the mother energy in this universe. Every woman I know has gone through a loss of her sexual essence. Every woman I know, every woman I have ever come across has had an experience of sexual assault or more. Every woman living today has been shamed around her sexuality simply by the society that we live in. This is horrendous. This is unjust. This is wrong. We have a right to holy rage around this. Holy rage is a divine order. It is to return the divine order. It is to return to what is natural. The holy rage is to bring back divinity into what has become undivine. It is the rage of a mother protecting her children. And it is the rage that is found in the what appears as chaotic and destructive turbulence of Mother Earth. Her transformational quality, her hurricanes, her tornadoes, her earthquakes, these are to cause change and to replenish or renew or restart, rebirth. Recently, Mary Magdalene came to me again as I prepare for the beginning teaching of the upcoming Women's Magic course, Elysium, Embrace Your Beauty. And I was guided to read this book again, the Magdalene Manuscript, which I highly recommend any woman who is alive today reads. And I felt Mary and the Sisters of the Dawn around me very strongly. And Mary asked me to open to intuitively to a page in the book. And there's a chapter called One Woman's Story. And it's actually the personal story of one of the co-authors of the book. It's not Mary's words, but it's the life story of this woman who wrote this book in 50% of the book she wrote. And I was like, okay, I will do as you ask. And when Spirit asks me to do things, I don't always understand exactly why, but what we do is we develop trust so that we can take that action anyway. So I did that. And as I read her story, I was incredibly moved, and I understood why Mary asked me to read it at this time. And I understand now too why I am meant to share my story with you as well. Because what I saw in that book and what I see in myself, and as I said, every woman that I've met, is the same story. It is a loss of the essence of who and what we are. In this woman's story, she describes going through terrible sexual trauma multiple times. And her story and her experiences were quite mirroring to my own experiences. And I just think I'm going to just flow with that and share with you now. So when I look at my feminine song and my sound now, it is such a wonderful gift. It is such a blessing that it was so amazing for me to go through these feminine initiations, because I was just moving through my personal alchemical process that I have been doing for over 6 years now. And it started to shift into healing the sexual trauma that had been stored in my bodies. And it started shifting into processing the memories of my mother and different things like this. And I started to have more feminine guides around me, the goddesses, Kali, Lakshmi, Kuan Yin, the Sisterhood of the Dawn or the Sisters of the Dawn, and my own feminine personal spirit guides. And through the beautiful magical ritual and spiritual practices that they had me do through my intuition, which I channeled to do and practice, I slowly regained my clarity, so the clearing of my sexual pathways, the Venus pathways within me. I cleared each area of that, which is your yoni, your womb, your throat, your pineal gland, your sight, your voice, your birthing power, and I suppose the safety that's in your root chakra, but also the holy canal that is what you birth through. And my sound now as a woman is so beautiful, and I had not realized how much we take on, and I took on the influence of my mother, and she would have taken on the influence of her mother, and all of that to come through us, and we continue and we continue and we continue this programming around ourselves that we shouldn't have our voice, that we shouldn't be rooted in our power, that we shouldn't be open in our intuition. We receive this message every day, directly and indirectly, and it is wrong. So I'm going to share with you my experience and we'll go from there. And of course, this isn't all of my experience. This is a cut down version of this for a video, and also to stay on the topic of the feminine side of things and the feminine healing side of things. So I remember, and I want to give a trigger warning here. If you have sexual trauma or trauma around violence, this may be triggering. You might not want to watch this video. You might want to go towards the end. Skip ahead. Okay, so I remember my mother holding down my arms as she told me that I had to let the terrible men who had bought me do things to my body. I remember my mother dragging me out of the room that I was in into the area where the men were waiting. My parents were very, very unwell people, very sick people. They were abusive on every level. They were part of a satanic ritualistic cult who also had a practice of and an organization of like organized pedophilia in the town, and that was a huge part of the cult practices as well. So I was sold to various men, as in my parents would be paid for that, as well as, you know, other children in my hometown. And I remember always, it was so hard with my mother because my dad was a rapist, and he was incredibly, he wasn't psychotic, but he was almost psychotic. He was incredibly unstable and violent, very sadistically violent. And so that is a very obvious way to be an abuser. And it's almost easier to deal with when you're living through that and to cope with than, on the other hand, having a parent or a caregiver who is supposed to be the one to protect you but is completely complicit in everything. And I remember my mother holding me down and telling me that it's what girls do. And other times when she wasn't holding me down, she was just saying stuff to me. She had beliefs and things that she would put onto me, and she would say, well, you know, it's because you were being too sexy and you shouldn't be like that if you don't want that to happen. And then other times, of course, she'd say the opposite thing and say, well, it's just what girls do. And then I remember her being envious of my beauty. I remember her being very victim in herself and very narcissistic in that victim's, like putting herself as the victim. She would often blame me for the actions of my dad. You know, well, you should have obeyed, or you should have done this, so that's why this happened. You made him angry, you know, because I said no, or I fought back, or something like this. And yeah, so I endured a lot of sexual trauma. I was raped regularly as a child and a teenager by disgusting men, people who were teachers in my hometown, people who were police officers, people who were religious figures in the town. There is a disease, there is a massive disease in men's consciousness particularly, but obviously also there are abusive women. But there is a disease where, with the pedophilia, where they are trying to reclaim their own innocence that was lost and destroyed long ago by their own trauma, by fetishizing children. On an energetic or psychological level, that's what's going on with a pedophile. They kind of have this unconscious desire to reclaim or reconsume their own innocence because it was lost. So I endured a lot of that, and when I was reading this book by the woman whose story I'm talking about, I'm going to look at it now, Judy Sion. to honor her name, Judy Sion. She spoke, or she wrote of walking home one night, and there was a story where it was the same night. There was one night and she was with a man, or she came across a man who tried to rape her, but she actually got away, and she ran away, and she ran down the dark street. And then on that same night, this car pulled up, and there was this man, and he was like, "Oh, you shouldn't be out here. You're gonna get hurt. Come get in my car, and I'll take you home. This isn't safe." And she got into the car with him, and that man pulled a knife on her and raped her that night. And she also describes other instances of being impregnated, I think, by sexual assault or rape, and having to give that child up secretly because of her mother's oppression, her mother's judgment, and the whole sort of society's fear at that time. This woman's quite a bit older than me, I believe, so that generationally would have been even harder on her. And she spoke of the dynamic that was with her mother as well, who was a very controlling, punishing, critical person in her life, and how she basically shamed her. And when I read all that, and I read the multiple instances of sexual trauma, I saw it like these portal after portal after portal of this trauma happening, and then this one, and then this one. And through that process, the degradation of the feminine, the loss of personal power, of personal ownership of the body, the things that the feminine is carrying right now, the loss of the ownership of one's body, the appreciation and honoring of her beauty, it has been turned into an ugliness. That's what happens when you are raped or you are assaulted. You take on the feelings of worthlessness and shame because that seems to be the only reason that it could have happened. And because that person is the person that dominated is trying to resolve their feelings of shame and worthlessness. And they are disgusting, and they have done something that is ugly. And it is so difficult to differentiate, and this is part of the huge healing process with sexual trauma, to differentiate between what they did was ugly and I am ugly. That is what people who have experienced sexual trauma get confused. What they did was treat me like I'm an object and like I'm worthless, so I must be worthless and like I'm just an object. But the work of healing this is to understand that that was their belief, that was their stuff, their perception, and that it was incorrect. It was just wrong. That's just a mistake. That's just not the truth of what happened and what you are. But I saw Judy's story as like a portal for so many women's story, because when I was reading that, I heard my own story in that, my own story of being dominated by sick men, of being threatened and controlled in that way, of having to abandon your body or your leadership and ownership of your body, disconnecting, and just ending up in, for me anyway, ending up in a place of like, okay, do whatever to me. Which is really just, as an adult later in your healing, it's kind of just being numb and disconnected and objectifying yourself in a way, just as a coping strategy to get through that. But the experiences that she had, they left her feeling so much pain, they left her feeling incredibly unsafe. They made her harden and create a kind of masculine protective wall as well. And that definitely happened to me. And as I was reading this, I was like feeling such a fierce, like a ferocity around this. And I asked Spirit, like, what, like, is this healthy anger? Is this just like I'm being a bit triggered? What is this? And there was some trigger there. There sometimes still is when I'm speaking about it, but it was clarifying around the concept of holy rage, which is that reading this story and looking at my own life was making me feel like, what has happened? What has happened to the feminine emanation, to the feminine essence? Where did it go? What has happened? And what are our brothers doing in this chaos where they have lost their mind? They have lost themselves. And what are they doing about it now? And what, as women, are we doing about this now? As women, I believe we are called to lead. We are called to lead ourselves back into our own victory, into our own queendom, our own leadership. We are called to lead ourselves home. In that call of leadership, it causes you to remember your power. We do not be saved. We do not need to be saved by anybody. We call ourselves home through our leadership, through having to lead yourself through processing trauma, through having to lead yourself through processing and creating a life that you desire, to having to lead yourself through the moments in your life where you must speak your voice and you must speak your truth. Those moments where in the past perhaps you have dropped your voice, silenced your voice. This all happens because the feminine emanation has been dead. I say death because what women do, what we are and what women do is resurrection. Resurrection is our holy power because we honor death. We are death as well. There's a healthy death I'm talking about for a moment here. The feminine is that dark portal. It's where things go to change, and change is death. Loss is change. Something going from form to formless, which is all death is change. And it is what Mother Nature, we see the best example and holy expression of it that we simply reflect in our Mother Earth, where her destruction reigns, death is there, it is a part of her. The tree on the bark falls away, the lightning strikes, transformation occurs through things dying. And when I feel into that and I think about that, I know that we have experienced a death of the feminine only to pull it down and to rebirth it and resurrect it so much more powerfully than ever before. And it is the tides of Venus that call us to remember now. It is the tides of Venus reawakening in your holy womb waters. And we get this and we do this and we get there by expressing ourselves and remembering who we are, by being outraged at the injustice in the rage of the divine feminine mother, of the Mother Earth. We create a tornado. We create lightning. We birth a flood. What is that lightning? What is that flood? It is the voice of your no. It is the voice of your holy yes to yourself. It is the voice of your yes to the places upon yourself where you have put restriction on yourself. So, where you are telling yourself that you're too emotional, where you have taken on the shame of your mother, and you're worried about showing off or being too beautiful, where you walk down the street at nighttime and you're afraid that you have to keep your keys in your hand. How many of us have kept your key like this when you're walking through a dark car park? It is in those moments to call on your holy power and to say, I am the feminine essence. I am the voice of the mother. And I hold myself and I express myself and I choose to express myself. And we must stop doing this to each other. It is you and I who will change the cycle just through our own healing and recognition of this, so that we won't have to so consciously think about not doing it to each other. But we need to understand that we have also programmed ourselves, or received that, taken that on, to squish ourselves firstly, squish your voice, squish your expression, and then we also do it to each other in our society today. There's sort of little comments and stuff around, oh, that girl is showing off, or she's showing a lot of skin, or all these things. We have to stop. We must stop. And I know that for me, in my life experience, being sold to men over and over and over, and being treated like an object and dismissed by my mother, was absolutely destructive and devastating beyond words. You know, I developed an incredible amount of dissociation so that I could live through what I lived through. I am still working my way back home to my body more fully. It can be a challenge to feel safe at all. However, I've done so much work in reclaiming my voice and reclaiming my holy womb power, and honoring that there is a feminine wounding here that we each experience. The feminine story of loss of yourself, loss of your voice, loss of your magnetism, which comes from your sexual energy. Not just your sexual energy, but a lot your sexual energy. We have gone through eons and times and times and times of trauma and sexual violation that meant that we cut ourselves off from that. We cut ourselves off from the holiness of it. We either completely cut ourselves off from it, or we go with the total distortion of it, which is where there is an over-sexualization and a really distortion of all of that. I know for me personally, in my experience, I went more total disconnect from sexuality. I just, and if I did have sexual interactions, this was kind of when I was older and I was not yet free, but going that way, and I started to have my own life with boyfriends and things. I was quite, I would say, automatic and dissociated, and I didn't know that that's what I was doing. I didn't really have the awareness that I have now around myself and my past and everything. And it was really just a reflection of the disconnect from myself and my body, which was really happening because of a deeper disconnect and avoidance of facing the trauma of the past. So my way of dealing with that sexual trauma was to avoid it completely, to try not to think about it, and to, dissociate. I developed dissociative personalities who would protect me from the knowledge of my lived experience, which was natural and necessary. And any person who goes through repetitive extensive trauma as a child in that early stage of development will develop a dissociative identity strategy. But that meant that I didn't always have conscious awareness of my true life experience and what I had been through. And healing all of this meant that I had to go towards all of this. So I had to remember the feeling of my own mother holding my arms down. I had to remember all these little moments, like I said earlier about the trauma from my dad and other men. At least it was much more obvious and direct. He would just come in and rape me, and it would be disgusting, and terrible and maybe robotic and maybe extremely violent at times, just depending on what state he was in at that time, depending on who was around. I would say a lot of it was just a feeling of being like an object. And my mother just basically approving, more than approving, really, receiving money for this, just, sending me off to the men. I remember begging her to leave my dad at one point, and she just could not see. She actually could not see the wrongness of it because she was too blinded by her own self-protection to see that wrongness. Because if she saw the wrongness of all of that, she would have to see that she had been wronged by her experiences, because she was just copying what had happened to her in her experience with her mother. And probably her mother was disconnected and cold because of her mother's injuries. And on and on and on and on and on it goes. And this goes as far back to the time of Atlantis and the end times of Atlantis and Lemuria, where some of the seers and priestesses became very distorted and very unwell, and used their magic for negative influence. And there were lots of factors in that, but it all comes back to that. If we go quite far back, that's where things are coming from. Also, Spirit's telling me now about, reminding me, it's also about Venus. It's also about the fact that we were once merged with the planet of Venus, and there was even a time where the Earth kind of lost her feminine essence and lost her heart, and Venus was ceded to the Earth, or the energy of Venus was ceded to the Earth, to bring back the heart. At the heart energy, and that went well for a time, but then eventually men became afraid of that magic, and that led to the witch trials and this sort of thing. And then pretty much from just after Egypt is where women started to be completely in that really serious oppression of like having to be a Puritan and like really religion and all of that, and do not show your ankle, this kind of stuff. It's all just like a giant weaving of fear of the masculine, but also women. We then helped it along by perpetuating it through our mother's, our mother's mother. She was just doing what had been going on for her. And it's not an excuse though. It's not an excuse for my mother or your mother or anyone, because we all always have a choice to heal, to face what we're avoiding within, to face the pain that we're trying to resolve. An abuser is trying to resolve their own inner struggle by taking actions out on someone else. They're avoiding their shadow, basically. And we always have a heart choice for that, to go towards our heart or go towards fear. That being said, having understanding and clarity around that can help us create a sense of forgiveness. And forgiveness is part of the medicine for women going forward. And forgiveness doesn't mean, it never really means that was completely fine, that was okay. It just means freedom. It's personal freedom for you, for the forgiver, to know that you don't have to be angry anymore, to know that it's safe to not be angry anymore. It's safe to not feel and carry that load of resentment and blame anymore. The only reason we hold those feelings is when we haven't fully processed them and we haven't fully understood that we're safe now and it's safe to let them go. Because if I keep my anger and my resentment and pain and blame, it's a weird backup strategy to always remember that time, so that I'm always protecting myself, so that I'm always safe. That'll keep me safe. I can't forget about that. But what has to happen is a realization that you can have a new strategy for safety, and you can have boundaries now, and you're freer now, and different healing perspectives like this that come from, being more fully here in the present moment. And so I had to really process the grief that arose. There was incredible pain around the absence of my mother's love, and the revelation and realization that it was really her influence that made me believe, or helped me to believe, that I was bad or wrong or even evil, which is a core belief sort of thing that I lived with for a very long time. It was very instilled in me through intentional direct programming of the more on the occult side of things, but also through my processing, seeing how much of that was just from not being loved by the person that you, as a child, wish that would love you the most and would protect you and keep you safe and nurture you. And even more than, receiving that from the treatment of my father and the rapists and all of that. For me, in my personal experience anyway, there is nothing quite like the pain of recognizing that about my mother. The pain of being raped and the pain of, being used and not seen and all of that by my father, who is also, that person is supposed to embody the Holy Father and has supposed to have an energy of stability, foundation, protection, providing. And of course, he should have provided that as well. But I can't quite put into words the incredible pain that was living in my heart, the grief that was living in my heart for a long time, that helped cement and root the belief that I am bad. My mother's inability to see the truth of me, or treat me as the truth of me, which is that I am good and beautiful, is really what helps cement, I must be bad. Like, it must be true that I'm not good and I'm bad because, she doesn't, that must be the way that it is. And a lot of this is unconscious as a child, but I think I also did have some of those conscious thoughts. But children you'll protect yourself from seeing the truth of your parent or the dangerous caregiver, in order to keep the attachment that you have with them for survival. It's a strategy used by your mind. It's completely understandable and okay. When you are safe enough to see clearly, it needs to change, and it will be sitting on top of the layers of, incredible pain of seeing the truth of your caregiver who you were attached to and who you wished loved you. So I'm just feeling if there was anything more that Spirit wants me to share, because they asked me to speak about the pain and the grief. I just remember feeling, and when I was processing it, and as an adult now and at the time, just completely devastated. Like, the word is devastation. That's why I almost say I can't quite find the word, because the words is just devastation. Because there's something in you, and there's something in me, even as a little girl, that knew that this was wrong, or that this wasn't meant to be, or that I deserved or wanted something better for myself. And that was a part of things as well that I wanted to talk about, was that particularly as women, but this will also happen to all people, but particularly as women, and something that Judy wrote about in her book as well, is having this knowing this knowing of what is wrong and what is right, because that comes from your inner wisdom of eons of time and lots of things, but also your capacity to sense what is in divine order and what is not, because you are the mother. You are the mother, and you're also kind of your own child, and you know what is right for you. You're also kind of Mother Earth. You know what is natural. And so I remember, I think what we want to speak to here is about gaslighting from one's mother, or women gaslighting each other. You might experience it with anyone, and you probably gaslight yourself, your own sense of truth and knowing. So, but particularly around, keeping this particularly around the expression of the feminine. So when I would use my voice, which is no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to go see that man. My mother would completely ignore it, or just drag me, as I said, or do both, or shame me. And that was the strategy to control and oppress my voice. And that's a different approach. Also, just as a side note, that's a different approach than the masculine typically. Like, they will also gaslight and do these things, but it's a very feminine thing. It's a very emotional injury, that the feminine will lean towards emotional injury, which is why there's more abusers who are physical, who are men, and there are slightly more emotional abusers who are women. Because we know, we have this sense, because we are deeply feeling beings. We're deeply sensitive. So my voice would be silenced through gaslighting, through, no, that's just the way that, the way that we are, or don't worry about that, or you're so sensitive, all these different things, you're too much. How many of us are living with this feeling that you're too much? And you may not have had extreme circumstances of abuse to end up with that feeling, because it is just simply ingrained right now in the majority of the collective consciousness of women, or where we have been. But that is really, women are like this, like we are massive. When you get your feminine power back, after I'd done this healing and I reclaimed my voice more fully, and I reclaimed my sexual essence and my magnetism that just naturally comes with that, and the power of kind of just allowing it, no longer saying no to the role of seduction, which is really just magnetism in your experience. Using your voice, using your sight, and saying, no, I see truth. I am truth because I am the mother. I see and I know divine order, for I am Mother Earth. And I will have a holy rage or a storm, a wildness to me that powers my storm to create change and rebalancing. And so I would really, we would really suppress that in each other. And that gets really oppressed, because that's really what's happened. The feminine is huge. It is so much bigger than we as women have been playing at. We have been barely touching it. Honestly, we have been barely touching it. You are meant to have a voice that is loud and strong like this, but coming up and in through your heart, your yoni, your womb. You have the power of sight here that sees and knows truth. And when you need to, you speak it. You share your vision. But you also just see it and you know it. And I knew that this was wrong. I remember even as a little girl being really like a very childlike confusion of like, why are they doing this? Like, if you can imagine a child's thoughts, but I did remember thinking like, what, like, why? Why don't you love me? Why are we doing this? There's no explanation. But there was a deep feeling in me that this was wrong. Otherwise, I wouldn't be asking that question. Okay? And truly, the masculine has been afraid of this. The masculine has been afraid of the bigness of the feminine, which she becomes a storm to create change. She knows and sees truth, so she will make it. She will create divine order. She will demand divine order. She is seductive and powerful, so she will take in disharmonious energies and change them. She will ask the masculine to rise. She will ask the masculine to connect to his heart. And collectively speaking, just in regards to wounded masculine men, they are afraid of that. They have, through their own various conditionings, been disconnected from that. Ultimately, they don't know that it's lovable anymore. But it is not our job as women to make them see that. The only role that we have now, and the role that I played as a little girl in my family, was the one that knew. You're the one that knows. You're the one that sees. You're the one that has instinct. Because you are Mother Earth and you are wild and you are the wolf. You have instinct. This is written into our energy. This is what woman or feminine emanation is. Because she holds the formless, she holds access to every portal, everything. And she is the one who simply emanates it. So she speaks it, she sings it, she embodies it, she is it. And in our human embodiment today, in our human form, we may then use our masculine force of movement and taking action to implement it. But then we return or retire to our feminine. And I know in my experience, and Judy wrote about this in her book, of being the one that knows and sees truth, and that people don't like that. Not just, we are sticking to masculine and feminine, but not just anyone that has a wounding around these things is going to push against you when you speak truth. They are going to push against your truth because they are insecure in their own. They're going to push against divine order because they are unfazed by being in their out of order. They want to stay where they are because it's comfortable, because they're scared, because of all these different things. But that's the power of the feminine. And Judy wrote about being oppressed and her voice being oppressed by, there was a particular experience she had with a man she was dating who was quite tyrannical in his abuse. He went above and beyond to be just very manipulative and controlling and dominating on every level. And she, she also wrote about triggering people and about people, her inner sense of knowing and people not appreciating that, or she said not everybody likes you, and that you can't live your life wanting everyone to like you. And that's what the feminine essence or emanation does too, is she is truth. She will speak the truth. And in my family, my mother didn't like the reflection that she would see in me when I would say no. That was me saying, no, this is wrong. That was me pointing to, showing truth. She didn't like that because she couldn't find her own no. And, also my father didn't like that. And I remember very clearly him, part of his motivation for hurting me so much was to destroy my innocence. He had a kind of hatred for innocence. He had a hatred for the purity that I embodied. The purity was enticing and he wanted to destroy it. what he didn't realize, and what many abusers don't realize, is that you cannot destroy purity because it's pure. That's what it is. You can only make me unaware of it for a time through my own lens, which I take full responsibility for, having adopted that, drawing those conclusions from actions someone else took on me, which was really all about them. In doing so, I abandoned my own self-concept of purity. I forgot that I was beautiful. I forgot that I am remembrance. I let myself forget. And in a way, I kept choosing to forget, and this is what we do with our beliefs, choosing to forget to cope and survive through the experience. And it is through the gift and the joy and the blessing of my life now that I'm able to create remembrance in myself. And I will just speak quickly too about, in my family, my mother lost her sister. Her sister died. All my life, though, I felt like a very strange connection to that sister, this aunt who I had never met, but there were pictures of her, and I just felt like I knew her. I had this connection to her. And then in recent years, I spoke with her spirit, received message of her spirit, and I understood a few things. I understood that she did not die, but she actually ran away from the home abusive experience that she was in. And she basically acts as a guide, or is kind of part of my spiritual team, I guess, with me. We have a similar soul essence. I feel there's some resonance there. And I also ran from my family situation. I was the one who ran. And I left a sister, and I left my mother, and of course, other family members. But I saw that this pattern repeated. So, my mother lost her sister. My mother wasn't mothered. Then I lost my sister because I had to when I left. And I wasn't mothered. And the change in me had to happen to change the story of my line. I changed the story of my line when I ran. And I took away and destroyed all power of those abusers when I chose myself and I chose truth. I chose freedom. And I was watching this TV show, I think it was a TV show the other day, and there was this thing in it about, it was a scene of a woman who had been sexually trafficked, and she had just been freed and was meeting with the police, like just happened. And she was talking with someone who was very compassionate, and this person was saying, you're free now, but there's a cost to your freedom, and the cost is that you can never go back. You can never go back to the way that things were, and you cannot contact anybody. And obviously you can see why I really related to that and why that stuck in my mind. But for the macrocosm that we're speaking about today, there may be a cost to your freedom. And it is that cost that many women are still oppressing themselves because they don't want to face it. The cost is maybe that your mother won't understand you. The cost is that other women or your sister might shame you. The cost is that you will change, and the people that cannot accept your change will fall away from you, or you will remove yourself, lest you stay and continue the pattern. And this, I feel Spirit pointing to this as important because it is what is holding a lot of women back in your progress, in your emotional development, is the fear of what's going to happen What are you making it mean about you? You know, that inner feeling of badness or guilt, shame. That if you are bright and shiny and you have a voice and you're loud and you're alive, if you have a different opinion than someone else, if you say no to somebody who really wants you to say yes, if you sing and dance and it doesn't look like everyone else's song or dance, if you cry and you feel wildly and deeply, and perhaps the man around you cannot handle it, and they try to contain you, and all of this may be an invitation, a tempting invitation for you to keep containing and suppressing your light and who and what you are. But how long will you do that? When will you stop? Our time is now. The story of every woman needs to change now. It is changing now. If you are watching this video, you are changing it now. You are invited to go as deeply as possible into this. To serve yourself as the queen that you are. A queen is one who remembers that she is holy and she is priestess and she is life. And that is who I am. My story is not, and Judy's story, this woman who wrote this book, her story is not having been a victim and all that darkness and trauma. The story, the song, is the power afterwards. It is the choice to heal, and it is your voice. It is your truth. It is her knowing. It is Judy's knowing. It is Judy's expression in this book that the Magdalene asked her to write, and she writes that she didn't really want to do it and she was reluctant. It is my choice to share my story with you now when the Magdalene asked me to. And I will keep doing so. I'm re-inspired to keep writing my book. And I will keep speaking to this. I wish to speak to women about this, about reclaiming your voice, reclaiming your power. The story of the feminine is to rise. The story of the feminine is to flow into the Garden of Eden. The story is the heaven that I am now in. The heaven of my life. The way that I dance, the sisters that I have, the music that I create, this voice that speaks to you now, the visions that I see, the knowing that I have that is free now. I am free now. And you are free. Just will you let yourself be? And I share this because I love you. If you want to go deeply into your power, I invite you to join me in Elysium, Embrace Your Beauty. This is a Holy Women's Magic course or training that is occurring over 8 weeks, very, very soon in February. I have a small group of women who are devoted to magic. This is for you if you are devoted to finding your voice, finding your power, standing up in your queen essence, and embodying that together. Story is your own. Your story, women's story, the feminine story now, is Eden.